Samantha was 42, living alone in a quiet Seattle suburb. Her house was beautiful, polished wood floors, warm lighting, the faint scent of lavender candles, but it always felt a little too still. Her husband, Mark, had grown distant over the years. He worked late most nights, slept on the far side of the bed, and spoke in short, distracted sentences. The love between them hadn't vanished in one day. It had simply faded, piece by piece, until Samantha found herself eating dinner alone, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to notice the silence that filled their home, when her sister called asking for a favor. Samantha agreed immediately. Her nephew Ethan, 26, had landed an internship in the city and needed a place to stay for a few weeks. She remembered him as the cheerful kid who used to run around at family barbecues, always eager to help, always smiling. It felt nice, she thought, to have some company again, someone young and full of life. The day Ethan arrived, the house suddenly felt brighter. He came in carrying 2 suitcases and a grin. "Aunt Sam, you haven't changed at all," he said, giving her a quick hug. She laughed, brushing off the compliment, but deep down it warmed her. He was kind, polite, and easy to be around. He helped with groceries, fixed a loose cabinet handle, and even cooked dinner a few times. He made her laugh, something she hadn't done freely in months. At first, their conversations were simple. They talked about work, movies, and family. But soon, they grew deeper. One night, as rain pattered softly outside, Samantha found herself talking about her marriage, how distant things had become, how hard it was to feel seen anymore. Ethan didn't interrupt or try to fix it. He just listened, nodding slowly, his eyes full of understanding. It surprised her how easy it was to talk to him. How natural it felt to open up over the next few days. Samantha began to notice small things. The way Ethan smiled when she entered the room. The way he remembered how she liked her coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. The way he listened so attentively that it felt like the world paused when she spoke. It wasn't anything romantic. It was simply attention, something she hadn't received in a long time. Still, it stirred something inside her, something she didn't quite understand. One evening, she came home exhausted after spending hours at a client's house, rearranging furniture in colors that never seemed right. "You look tense," Ethan said from the couch. He was reading something on his laptop but looked up when she dropped her purse on the table. "My back feels like stone," she admitted, laughing tiredly. "You should get a massage," he suggested. "You deserve one." She waved it off, saying she didn't have the time. Ethan closed his laptop. "I could help," he said suddenly. "I watched a few techniques online when I worked at the gym in college. Just pressure points, nothing serious." Samantha blinked, caught off guard. "You give me a massage?" she asked, amused. "Why not?" He replied, smiling. "It's just to help you relax. You've been working non-stop." His tone was light, innocent, but the offer made her heart skip unexpectedly. She laughed it off and went to the kitchen to pour herself tea. But the idea stayed in her mind longer than she wanted to admit. Later that night, as she sat by the window watching the rain, she couldn't help thinking about how thoughtful Ethan was. He had been there only a week, yet somehow he'd managed to fill the house with warmth that had been missing for years. Mark hadn't called once that week. He hadn't even texted. The realization made her chest ache. The next day was quiet. Samantha worked from home while Ethan was out at his internship. When he came back that evening, he found her rubbing her neck and groaning softly. "You didn't go for that massage, did you?" he teased, putting his bag down. She shook her head. "Didn't have the time." "Then you really need to let someone help you," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. She hesitated for a moment, then finally nodded. "Okay," she said, "just for a few minutes." He looked genuinely happy to help. "Sit down," he said, moving a chair near the window. She sat, a little nervous, her heart beating faster than she expected. He started lightly pressing her shoulders, not firm, not soft, just right. It wasn't romantic or inappropriate. It was careful and respectful. His hands moved with quiet confidence, and for the first time in months, Samantha felt her muscles loosen, her breath steadying. "You're really good at this," she said, trying to sound casual. Told you, he chuckled. Guess all that gym time paid off. For a few moments there was silence, just the sound of rain tapping on glass and the rhythm of his breathing behind her. Samantha felt herself relax completely. The tension in her shoulders melted away, replaced by a strange calm that bordered on emotional release. It wasn't about the touch itself, it was about being seen, being cared for, being noticed. She hadn't realized how much she missed that feeling. Then something unexpected happened. As she glanced toward the window, she caught sight of their reflection, her sitting still, his hands gently at her shoulders. Their eyes met in the glass. For a moment, the air changed. It wasn't physical, it wasn't spoken, it was something subtle but powerful. A silent awareness that they had stepped into a space neither had meant to enter. Samantha froze, then quickly stood up. "That's enough, Ethan," she said softly, trying to steady her voice. He looked startled and took a step back immediately. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean." "It's fine," she interrupted, forcing a smile. "You were just helping." He nodded, his expression apologetic, and quietly left the room. She sat back down, staring at the rain outside. Her heart was racing not from what happened, but from what almost happened, or what she had let herself feel, even for a second. It wasn't attraction, not really. It was recognition. Someone had looked at her, listened to her, cared about her, and she wasn't used to it that night. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how a simple act of kindness had stirred emotions she thought were long gone. She wasn't angry or ashamed, just confused. Ethan had meant no harm. She knew that. But something had shifted quietly and irreversibly. She turned on her side, closing her eyes, willing her heart to calm down. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel empty this time. It felt like something unspoken was floating in the air, something she didn't understand yet, but knew she would have to face. And as the rain continued to fall softly outside, Samantha realized that this was the first time in years she had actually felt something, anything at all. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It fell softly over Seattle, wrapping the city in a gray calm. Inside Samantha's house, the sound of it filled the spaces between her thoughts. She tried to distract herself with work, but she couldn't stop thinking about the moment that had changed everything. That brief, confusing instant when her eyes had met Ethan's reflection in the window. It had been nothing more than a second, but it left a strange warmth in her chest that she couldn't shake. The next evening, the air felt heavier. Samantha came home tired, her shoulders sore again from hours at her desk. Ethan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up the moment she walked in. "Rough day?" he asked. "You could say that," she replied with a weak smile, kicking off her shoes. He stood up, watching her stretch her neck with a quiet groan. "Still tense?" he asked. She nodded, rubbing her shoulder. There was a short silence before he spoke again. "I could help, if that's okay." His tone was calm, almost cautious, like he was afraid she'd say no. Samantha hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse, after all. Things already felt awkward enough, but another part of her didn't want to pretend that his kindness hadn't helped last time. "All right," she said softly. "Just this once." He smiled gently. "Okay, sit down." She sat on the couch and he stood behind her, his movements slower this time, more careful. When his hands touched her shoulders, she felt her breath catch for a second. It wasn't romantic, not in the way people might assume, but there was something deeply human in it. His hands were warm, steady, patient. He wasn't trying to make her feel uncomfortable. He was simply trying to take away her pain. At first, they said nothing. The rain tapped against the windows. The light from the lamp painted soft shadows on the walls. Samantha closed her eyes, letting out a deep sigh. "You have no idea how good that feels," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been holding too much stress," Ethan said quietly. "You should really take a break sometimes." She smiled faintly. Easier said than done. For a few moments, the silence between them felt peaceful. Samantha could feel her body relax, the tension melting away. But as the calm settled in, something inside her shifted, a quiet awareness that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about Ethan. It was about her, about the woman who had forgotten what comfort felt like when she opened her eyes. She caught sight of their reflection again, the two of them framed by the soft glow of the lamp. It looked innocent, but something about it made her heart quicken. She felt a strange guilt crawl up her throat, though she didn't know why. She turned slightly, meaning to say something light to break the silence. But then their eyes met again. It was brief, just a glance, but it changed everything. There was no flirting, no words, just an unspoken understanding that they both felt something they couldn't explain. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense. It was something deeper, something quiet and complicated. A recognition of loneliness, his, hers. Both. Samantha quickly looked away, her pulse racing. She stood up, brushing her hair behind her ear. "That's enough," she said softly, trying to sound calm. Ethan immediately stepped back, hands raised. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I didn't mean to make things weird." She forced a small smile. "You didn't. It's fine. I just need some air." Shu walked to the kitchen, pretending to tidy the counter. Anything to avoid meeting his eyes again. Ethan stayed where he was, clearly unsure of what to do. After a moment, he quietly said, "Good night, Aunt Sam," and went upstairs when the house grew quiet again. Samantha leaned against the counter, staring at the rain running down the window. Her heart still felt heavy, not because of what had happened, but because of what she had felt: warmth, comfort, and the sudden ache of being seen. She hadn't realized how much she missed that until now. That night, sleep didn't come easily. She turned from side to side, replaying the evening in her mind. She kept telling herself that nothing wrong had happened, that it was just a kind gesture, that he had only been trying to help. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. It wasn't about what Ethan did. It was about what it reminded her of, how starved she was for closeness, for kindness, for someone to look at her like she mattered by morning. She convinced herself to move on. She told herself it was just an awkward moment, nothing more. Ethan acted the same at breakfast, polite, cheerful, pretending nothing had changed. They talked about work, about his internship, about how Seattle weather never seemed to take a break. But beneath their words, something had shifted. A quiet tension lingered. Not heavy, just noticeable enough to make every glance feel loaded. Days passed like that. Ethan kept his distance a little more, and Samantha appreciated it, though she sometimes caught herself missing his presence. She tried to focus on her projects, sending emails, sketching new designs, but every time she sat still, her mind drifted back to that reflection, the moment she'd seen herself through someone else's eyes again. One evening, she came home early and found him in the kitchen making pasta. He turned when she entered, smiling softly. "Dinner's almost ready," he said. She nodded, watching him move around the kitchen with ease. He looked confident, grown up, different from the boy she remembered. "You didn't have to cook," she said. "You've done enough already." "I wanted to," he replied simply. "You've been working too much." They ate together quietly, the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. At one point, their hands brushed when they both reached for the salt, and both pulled away quickly, pretending not to notice. Samantha smiled faintly to herself. It was strange. The situation, the emotions, the timing, all of it. But it wasn't wrong, not really. It was just real. After dinner, Ethan cleared the table and said goodnight earlier than usual. Samantha watched him walk up the stairs and felt an ache in her chest. Not desire, but sadness. She knew they were both confused, and maybe a little scared of crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. When she finally sat down with her tea, the rain began again outside, steady and calm. She stared at the window, watching the drops slide down, and realized something important. It wasn't Ethan she wanted. It was the reminder that she was still alive inside, still capable of feeling warmth, connection, and care. For years, she'd been numb, locked in a loveless marriage, going through motions that meant nothing. Ethan hadn't created those feelings, he'd just uncovered them. She went to bed that night feeling strangely calm. The tension was still there, but now she understood it better. It wasn't about romance or guilt. It was about awakening, A quiet reminder that she still had a heart, still wanted to be seen, and still deserved to be treated with tenderness. As she drifted to sleep, the last thought that crossed her mind was a simple one. Sometimes, life sends people not to stay, but to remind us of what we've forgotten. And maybe that's what Ethan's touch had really done. Not stir forbidden feelings, but awaken something long buried beneath years of loneliness. The following days felt heavy in the house, even though no one said a word about what had happened. The rain had finally stopped, but the silence between Samantha and Ethan carried its own kind of storm. They spoke politely, shared meals, laughed about small things, yet underneath, both of them knew something had changed. Samantha kept herself busy, throwing her energy into work. She spent long hours in her home office sketching designs that didn't really matter, answering emails she didn't care about. Anything to avoid the strange mix of guilt and warmth she felt whenever she saw Ethan. He, too, tried to act normal. He went to his internship early, came home late, and avoided being alone with her for too long. But no matter how much they tried to move past it, that quiet connection between them remained unspoken. But alive. One evening, Samantha came home later than usual. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. She found Ethan sitting at the dining table with his laptop closed, his expression thoughtful. "You're home late," he said, standing up quickly. "Yeah," she sighed. "I had to meet a client. Long day." He nodded, hesitating for a moment before saying, "Can we talk?" Her heart skipped. "Sure," she said cautiously, sitting down across from him. He took a deep breath. "Aunt Sam, I want to apologize for the other night. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted to help. I hate seeing you stressed all the time." Samantha looked at him, her expression softening. His sincerity was clear in his voice. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said gently. "You were being kind. Maybe I just overreacted." He shook his head. "No, I crossed a line. I should have known better. You're married, and Ethan—" She interrupted, her tone calm but firm. "Please don't blame yourself. The truth is, it wasn't about you." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" She exhaled slowly, her eyes drifting to the table. "It's about me. About how lonely I've become. How much I miss feeling." Noticed. The words hung in the air like fragile glass. She hadn't meant to say them out loud, but once she did, she couldn't stop. "Mark doesn't even see me anymore. We live in the same house, but it feels like we're miles apart. He used to ask about my day, used to care. Now it's just silence all the time." Ethan's eyes softened. "You deserve better than that," he said quietly. Samantha smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "It's funny. I used to think love meant staying no matter what. But sometimes, staying just breaks you slowly." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "He doesn't see you the way you deserve to be seen," he said. "You're strong, kind, beautiful." He stopped himself mid-sentence, realizing what he was saying. She looked up, surprised, but he quickly looked away. The silence that followed was thick, filled with unspoken thoughts. Samantha felt her throat tighten. She wanted to tell him not to say things like that, but deep down, hearing those words after years of emptiness made her heart ache in a way she didn't expect. She forced a small smile. "You're sweet, Ethan, but we both know this can't go anywhere." He nodded slowly, his expression serious. "I know. I just wanted you to know what I think. You deserve someone who actually sees you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Samantha stood up and walked to the window. The city lights glimmered faintly through the drizzle. "You remind me of how it used to feel," she said softly, "when life was lighter, when love didn't hurt." Ethan stood too, keeping a respectful distance. "Maybe that's what family's supposed to do," he said gently. "Remind us who we are." She turned to him, tears in her eyes, but there was a hint of peace in her expression. "Maybe," she whispered. The next few days passed quietly, but something inside Samantha had shifted. That conversation, honest, painful, but healing, had opened her eyes. She realized she couldn't keep pretending that everything in her marriage was fine. She was tired of being invisible. Mark came home late, as usual, that week. He ate dinner without saying a word, scrolling through his phone, distracted as always. Samantha watched him for a long moment, then asked, "Do you even notice how distant we've become?" He barely looked up. "I've been busy, Sam. You know how work is? It's not just work," she said softly. "It's everything. We barely talk. You don't look at me anymore. You don't even seem like you want to be here." Mark sighed, setting his fork down. "Why are we doing this now?" "Because it's time," she said simply. "I can't keep pretending this is normal." He rubbed his temples, frustrated. "You're overthinking it. Every couple goes through quiet phases." "This isn't a phase," she replied, her voice steady. "This is a goodbye that's taking too long." Mark didn't respond. He just stood up, muttered something about being tired, and walked away. That night, Samantha lay awake again, but this time her mind was clear. She wasn't angry, just done. Ethan hadn't caused her marriage to fall apart. It had been broken long before he came. What he did was make her realize that she still had the right to feel alive, to feel worthy of affection and kindness. The next morning, she woke early and made breakfast. Ethan came downstairs, surprised to see her up so soon. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," she replied, handing him a cup of coffee. For a moment they just stood there, the air between them calm and simple. "I think I needed you here," she said suddenly. "Not in the way you might think, but because you reminded me of something important." "What's that?" he asked. "That I've been waiting for someone to save me," she said quietly. "But I should have been saving myself." Ethan smiled, a mix of pride and sadness in his eyes. "You've always been strong, Aunt Sam. You just forgot it for a while." She smiled back. "Maybe, but I remember now." Over the next week, things between them softened. The awkwardness faded, replaced by a gentle understanding. They still laughed, shared meals, talked about work, but now their connection felt grounded in something pure. Respect, gratitude, healing. Samantha started taking small steps toward change. She met with a lawyer to discuss her options, not out of anger, but from a place of clarity. She began running in the mornings again, feeling her body come alive after years of stillness. For the first time in a long time, she looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman who wasn't waiting for love to return, but ready to find her own peace. Ethan noticed it too. "You look lighter," he said one morning as she poured coffee. "I feel lighter," she admitted with a smile. And she meant it, because even though her heart still ached, it wasn't from confusion anymore. It was from release, the kind that comes when you stop fighting what's gone and start embracing what's next. That evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Samantha realized something quietly profound. Life doesn't always fall apart to punish you. Sometimes it does so to wake you up. And that's exactly what Ethan had unknowingly done. He had walked into her house and reminded her of who she used to be, strong, kind, and worthy of being seen. A week later, the morning sun finally broke through the Seattle clouds, casting light across the living room. The air felt different still, but filled with quiet emotion. It was Ethan's last day at Samantha's house. His internship had ended, and his bags were already packed by the door. Samantha stood in the kitchen making coffee, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred the cup. She told herself it was just another goodbye, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. This farewell carried something heavier, something that had changed both of them in ways they hadn't planned. Ethan walked in, his usual cheerful tone replaced with calm silence. "You're up early," he said, trying to sound light. She smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep? You ready?" He nodded, glancing at his luggage. "Yeah, feels weird leaving," he admitted. "It's only been a few weeks, but it feels like months." Samantha didn't respond right away. She didn't trust her voice to stay steady. They sat at the table with their coffee, the silence between them soft but full of unspoken thoughts. Samantha finally said, "You've been a big help, Ethan. I mean that. You made the house feel alive again." He smiled, eyes warm. "I should be thanking you. You made me feel at home when I needed it the most." She looked at him, and for a second, she saw the boy she used to know and the man he'd become, kind, mature, and quietly strong. "You've grown into someone special," she said. "Your parents must be proud." Ethan looked down, smiling. "I hope so. But I'm proud of you too, Aunt Sam. You finally seem like yourself again." His words hit deeper than he knew. For the first time in years, Samantha felt seen not as a wife, not as someone's responsibility, but as a person who mattered. It was strange how a few weeks could change so much. Ethan hadn't just been her nephew. He'd become a mirror, showing her what she had lost and what she still had inside her. When it was time to leave, they stood at the doorway. The morning light fell on both of them, soft and warm. Ethan reached for his bags, but before he could speak, Samantha said, "Ethan, thank you for everything." Her voice cracked slightly. He put the bags down and hugged her gently. It wasn't a long hug, but it carried years of unspoken emotion, gratitude, care, and a silent promise to remember what they had learned from each other. He whispered, "Take care of yourself, Aunt Sam, and don't forget you deserve more than half a love." She closed her eyes, holding back tears. When he stepped back, she managed to smile. "Go make your life amazing," she said. He nodded, smiled faintly, and walked out the door. The sound of his car fading down the street felt like the closing of a chapter. Samantha stood there for a long time, her coffee cooling in her hand, staring at the quiet space he'd left behind. The house was still again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. Over the next few days, Samantha moved through her routines with a new kind of energy. She cleaned the house, opened the curtains, let sunlight pour into rooms that had been dim for too long. She started playing music while she worked, something she hadn't done in years. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was living. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table alone with her thoughts. Mark hadn't called all week, and for once, she didn't care. The distance between them no longer scared her. It felt like clarity. She realized that love wasn't supposed to make her feel invisible. It was supposed to make her grow, and she had grown, just not in the way she had expected. When Mark finally returned from another one of his long work trips, Samantha met him at the door. "We need to talk," she said calmly. He looked surprised. Now she nodded. They sat in the living room, the space that had once felt cold but now carried a quiet strength. "I think we both know this isn't working," she began. "We've been pretending for a long time. I don't blame you. I just can't keep living like this." Mark sighed, his expression unreadable. "Is this about someone else?" Samantha shook her head. "No, this is about me. About us. About how lost we've become." He rubbed his temples. "So what do you want, Sam?" "I want peace," she said simply. "And I want you to have it too." There was no shouting, no anger, just an understanding that their time together had quietly ended long before this conversation. Mark didn't argue. He only nodded, a tired look in his eyes. "I guess you're right," he said softly. That night, Samantha slept deeply for the first time in years. When she woke up, the house was quiet again, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt free. In the weeks that followed, she began rebuilding her life. She started traveling for work, taking design projects in new cities, meeting people who inspired her. She joined a small art class on weekends, something she had always wanted to do. Every step felt like a return to herself, the version of Samantha who used to dream, laugh, and believe that life could still surprise her. Sometimes she thought about Ethan not in a longing way, but with gratitude. She remembered his kindness, his quiet words, his ability to see her when she had stopped seeing herself. He hadn't come into her life to complicate it. He had come to remind her that even broken hearts could find light again. One evening, months later, Samantha stood by her window, watching the rain fall just like it had that first night he offered to help her. She smiled softly, realizing how much had changed. Back then, the rain had felt lonely. Now it felt cleansing, like the world had washed away everything that no longer belonged. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her photos, and paused at one. Ethan helping her paint the living room wall. Both of them laughing, her hair messy, his shirt covered in paint. She smiled. It wasn't a picture of sadness or confusion. It was a memory of healing the moment her life began to shift back toward light. That night, she wrote a short message to him. Proud of you. Hope life's treating you well. She didn't expect a reply, but a few minutes later, her phone buzzed. Thanks, Aunt Sam. Couldn't have done it without you. She laughed quietly, putting her phone aside. Outside, the rain kept falling, but the sound felt warm. Like a song she finally understood. Samantha looked around her home, the same house that once echoed with emptiness, and realized it was no longer just walls and rooms. It was hers again. It was filled with peace, with lessons, with the strength she had rediscovered, and as she closed her eyes, she whispered to herself, sometimes love doesn't stay forever. Sometimes it just stops by to wake you up. She smiled, not because of what she'd lost, but because of what she'd found herself.